The air inside the Kabul forward operating base was thick with tension. For weeks, the mountains had swallowed patrols whole. Ambushes waiting in the shadows. Marines returning bloodied, if they returned at all. Boots struck the plywood floor of the operations tent, steady and deliberate. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres walked in. Small, quiet, unassuming. Nothing about her looked like the kind of legend men whispered about in the dead of night. Marines glanced up from their maps. A cluster of Navy SEALs leaned back in their chairs, smirking, whispering under their breath. "That's her? That's the one they've been talking about?" A low chuckle spread. To them, she was just another Marine, too lean, too quiet to be anything more. At the far end, General Marcus Steele straightened, his chest full of ribbons, his voice known for breaking men before battle ever did. He had heard the rumors too, but he didn't believe in rumors. He believed in results. And the quiet woman in front of him didn't look like results. The room grew restless. Laughter mixing with doubt. Whispers rippled like static. "That's supposed to be the one they call something." The words hung heavy. The call sign left unspoken. General Steele's eyes narrowed. He was old school and he hated legends. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? General Marcus Steele had been in the Army for over 30 years. He could read a room the way a sniper reads the wind. And what he saw now unsettled him. The moment Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres stepped into the tent, the entire atmosphere shifted. It wasn't the way she walked or the way she held herself. It was the way every man around her reacted. The Marines stiffened, their chatter dying off mid-sentence. Even the Navy SEALs, cocky and unshakable, quieted down just long enough to glance her way. That was enough for Steele. He hated whispers. He hated rumors. And most of all, he hated legends he couldn't control. A legend made soldiers believe in ghosts, and ghosts got men killed. He pushed back from the briefing table, boots striking hard against the plywood floor. The tent went silent. His stare locked on Torres, cold and unforgiving. "You," he barked, voice carrying the weight of command. "Step forward." Without hesitation, Torres moved. Every eye in the tent followed her, the weight of curiosity pressing heavy. She looked smaller than most of the men, leaner, too. But there was something in the way she carried herself, shoulders square, eyes steady, that refused to bend. "Name unit." Steele's tone was sharp, designed to cut through hesitation like a blade. Torres answered calmly, voice even, no nerves detectable. "Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres." "First Recon, sir." The answer was textbook crisp. Exactly what he'd expected. But it didn't satisfy him. He had heard the stories filtering back from the field. Stories of a Marine who never missed, who slipped through chaos unseen, who dragged entire squads back from the brink. It made his blood run hot. Soldiers should fear their enemies, not worship their comrades. He took a step closer, his shadow falling across her face, his jaw tightened, the corner of his mouth pulling into the faintest scowl. "Not good enough," he said quietly, but every man in the tent heard it. Call sign. The effect was instant. The room seemed to stop breathing. Marines glanced at one another. A SEAL shifted in his chair. Boots scraping the floor. Whispers that had run wild for weeks suddenly collided with a moment of truth. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone wanted to hear it. And everyone feared it. Torres didn't blink. She didn't fidget. Her face remained calm, almost detached, as if she had lived this confrontation 100 times in her head already. She lifted her chin slightly, meeting Steele's stare without a flicker of doubt. Her voice was level, steady, stripped of ego or arrogance. "Specter 6. The words cut through the tent like a blade through canvas. Silence followed, thick, heavy, absolute. For a long moment, even General Steele said nothing. He had heard the call sign before in reports that were stamped, classified, and buried deep. He had dismissed it then as exaggeration, soldiers making myths to explain survival. But now, standing in front of him, the myth had a face, a uniform, and eyes that didn't break under pressure. Around the room, Marines shifted uncomfortably, SEALs straightened in their seats. The smirks were gone. The laughter was gone. All that remained was the weight of two words. Specter 6. And nobody doubted anymore. The sound of her words still hung in the air like smoke. Specter 6. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The laughter that had trickled through the 10 minutes before was gone. The SEALs, men who had walked through fire and thought themselves unshakable, sat frozen. One of them, the loudest voice in the back, had been leaning casually in his chair moments ago. Now he sat upright, hands resting on his knees, his jaw clenched tight. Across the table, junior officers exchanged uncertain glances. They had read fragments of the after-action reports, the ones never meant to be circulated beyond secure channels. Reports that told of a Marine who vanished into alleyways in Kabul only to reappear behind enemy firing lines. A Marine who turned hopeless firefights into clean victories. But those documents had always been marked with the same word, unverified. Now the source of those whispers stood in the same room, breathing the same air, and the weight of it sank deep into every man present. General Steele's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. He had lived through more campaigns than he cared to count, had seen heroes made and broken in the space of a single night. He did not trust myths, and he hated when soldiers built them around flesh and blood. But the call sign had punched straight through his skepticism because he had heard it before in classified chatter, in reports delivered behind closed doors, in whispers that made even seasoned men lower their voices. Specter 6, Steele repeated slowly, almost to himself. The words tasted like iron on his tongue. The tent was still as stone. Marines who had mocked her quietly a few minutes earlier shifted in their seats, avoiding her gaze. No one laughed now. No one whispered. They had all felt the sudden change, the moment when a rumor became a fact. Torres stood motionless, her expression calm, neither proud nor defensive. She offered nothing more. She had spoken her name, and that was enough. One SEAL finally broke the silence. He muttered under his breath. Not quite loud enough to be heard by the general, but loud enough for the men around him. No wonder they're alive. The words spread like sparks catching dry grass. Men remember the missions gone sideways in Kabul when units pinned under fire had somehow clawed their way back without losing a single man. The stories had always seemed exaggerated, a way for Marines to comfort themselves in the aftermath of chaos. But now those same men realized the center of those stories was standing right in front of them. General Steele's eyes drilled into her, testing for cracks, searching for weakness. He saw none. Behind those eyes was calm fire. Not arrogance, not bravado, but certainty. And for the first time in a long career, Steele found himself unsettled. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, but it carried farther than the bark of command. I hope, Sergeant, that name isn't just smoke. Torres met his stare without flinching. It isn't, sir. The silence returned, but this time it was no longer mocking. It was respect, raw and heavy, the kind that can't be demanded, only earned. Weeks before that tense briefing, Kabul streets had already written her legend. It was supposed to be a routine patrol, narrow alleys, dust rising off the cracked stone, children watching from doorways with unreadable eyes. Gunnery Sergeant Elena Torres walked point, her rifle steady, her instincts sharp. She didn't like the silence. In Kabul, silence was never safe. The trap snapped shut without warning. The first burst of gunfire tore from the rooftops, shattering windows and filling the street with chaos. Marines dove for cover behind broken walls and burned-out cars. Shouts crackled through the comms. Man down. We've got wounded. Rounds slammed into stone inches from Torres's head, showering her in grit. Her squad was pinned, bleeding, trapped in a kill zone with no way forward. Enemy fighters had every angle covered. Rooftops, side alleys, hidden doorways. She pressed flat against the rubble, heart steady, mind narrowing. Panic swirled around her, but she didn't let it touch her. She scanned the chaos, saw the way the fire patterns overlapped, saw the small gaps where they didn't. There, a blind spot, a way through if she was willing to crawl through broken glass to take it. Without a word, Torres slipped from cover. She dragged herself low across debris, crawling through dust and blood inches at a time. Bullets hissed so close she could feel the heat snap past her cheek. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. She slid into the shadows of a collapsed wall, circled wide through the maze of back alleys, and emerged behind the first rooftop team. One squeeze of the trigger, precise, controlled, and the threat was gone. Then another, and another. She moved like smoke, never staying in one place long enough to be spotted. A shadow weaving through Kabul's maze of brick and dust. 12 enemy firing points fell in sequence, each shot deliberate. Each target silenced before they even knew she was there. Back in the kill zone, the Marines felt the pressure shift. Gunfire that had pinned them suddenly faltered. Shouts of confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Marines lifted their heads, realizing they had room to breathe. Push forward. Move, someone yelled. And for the first time that day, the squad surged. By the time Torres returned to them, her rifle was still warm. Her uniform streaked with dust and sweat. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Every man in that alley knew who had pulled them out of the fire. Not a single Marine was left behind. Not one. When the reports came in later, officers argued over how it had happened. Some said luck. Some said exaggeration. But the Marines who had been there knew better. They started whispering her call sign in mess halls and on convoys, passing it from squad to squad. Specter 6. The name of the Marine who crawled through hell and brought them all home. The operations tent was still heavy with the echo of her call sign. Specter 6. Men who had scoffed at her minutes earlier now avoided her eyes. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was reverence. And General Marcus Steele felt it pressing against him like the weight of a storm. He leaned his fists on the table, the maps beneath his knuckles crinkling under the pressure, his gaze fixed on Torres, sharp and unforgiving. He had seen reputations swell too fast. Men crushed beneath the weight of names they could never live up to. Legends were dangerous. They made soldiers reckless, convinced them someone was invincible. And when that myth shattered, Marines died. Finally, he straightened, boots thudding as he closed the distance between them. He stopped just short of her, eyes locked, voice cutting the air. "You understand what you've just done, Sergeant?" Torres stood at attention, shoulders square, chin lifted slightly. "Yes, sir," his jaw tightened. "Legends break men. Marines will expect you to be unbreakable. They'll believe you can't fall, and if you do, they'll fall with you." The words hung sharp, meant to dig under her armor. Around the tent, Marines shifted uneasily. SEALs leaned forward in their seats. No one dared speak, but every man listened. Torres didn't blink. Her breathing was calm, her eyes steady. She'd heard fear dressed as warnings before. She had lived under it every time bullets cracked past her helmet in Kabul's alleys. When she answered, her voice was quiet, but carved in steel. "Then I won't break, sir." The tent went still again, thicker than before. Even the hum of the generator outside seemed to fade. For a moment, General Steele said nothing. He studied her face the way a battlefield commander studies terrain, looking for weaknesses, hidden fractures, the signs of a bluff. But what stared back at him wasn't arrogance or bravado. It was calm certainty, the kind forged under fire and sharpened by survival. One of the younger officers glanced at the general nervously as if waiting for him to strike her down for insolence. Instead, Steele exhaled through his nose, slow and measured. "You think it's that simple," he said, but the edge in his voice was softer now. "You think it's just about not breaking." Torres didn't move. "I don't think, sir, I know. My Marines are alive because I don't." The response was blunt, stripped of ego, but it hit the room like a thunderclamp. The SEAL, who had laughed earlier, lowered his gaze. A captain near the table pressed his lips together, suddenly aware that the weight of the myth had just been matched by fact. General Steele's expressions shifted almost imperceptibly. The skepticism remained, but beneath it, something else flickered. Recognition. Respect. Reluctant, but undeniable. He stepped back, his voice quieter now, but carrying farther than before. "Very well, Specter 6. No one moved. No one spoke. The legend wasn't just a whisper anymore. In that tent, under the gaze of the general himself, it had been acknowledged. Respect had shifted permanently. The silence in the operations tent hadn't yet lifted when the door flap snapped open. A young lieutenant hurried in, a folder clutched tight under his arm, his face pale beneath the harsh lights. He placed the papers in front of General Steele without a word. Steele scanned the report, his jaw tightening with each line. Then he looked up, his eyes narrowing on the room. "Recon Bravo's gone dark," he said. His voice was even, but the gravity sank instantly into every chest. "Last contact was 20 minutes ago, outskirts of Kabul. No comms, no movement, high chance of ambush." A ripple of unease passed through the gathered Marines and SEALs. Everyone knew what that meant. A silent unit in Kabul's outskirts wasn't just lost. It was surrounded. Steele's gaze shifted deliberately to Torres. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sergeant Torres, you're on point." The words dropped like a hammer. A few SEALs traded quick glances. Their earlier mockery replaced with unease. They'd heard whispers, seen her stand toe-to-toe with the general without flinching, but this was different. This wasn't rumor or briefing room bravado. This was a test written in blood and dust. Torres didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." She adjusted the strap of her rifle, stepping forward with the calm precision of someone preparing for another long march around her. Boots scraped and rifles clicked as Marines and SEALs fell into formation. Doubt lingered in their eyes, but so did something else, a curiosity that bordered on respect. Outside, the Kabul night was alive with tension. The city hummed in the distance, but the outskirts were darker, quieter, where danger lived behind every broken wall. The convoy moved out under red light, tires crunching gravel, engines low to avoid attention. Inside the armored vehicle, no one spoke. Torres sat near the door, helmet tilted slightly down, eyes closed for a moment of stillness. To anyone else, it looked like calm. To her, it was calculation. The pattern of enemy fire she had studied before, the blind spots she had crawled through, the rhythm of ambushes in Kabul's alleys. She mapped them all silently in her mind. When they reached the outskirts, Steele's voice crackled through the radio. "Specter 6, lead them in." Torres signaled her team forward. They dismounted, boots hitting dirt, rifles raised. The alleys yawned open before them, dark and suffocating. A single dog barked in the distance. Then silence reclaimed the night. The SEAL nearest her whispered, "Feels like a trap." Torres didn't answer. Her hand went up, signaling a halt. Her eyes scanned the rooftops, the shadows, the cracked windows that seemed too quiet. She felt it, the shift in the air, the weight of eyes watching. "Positions," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the comms with steady certainty. The Marines and SEALs moved, trusting her tone more than their own nerves. And then, as if on cue, the night exploded with gunfire. The first crack of a rifle shattered the silence. A Marine went down hard, his brothers dragging him behind cover as bullets ricocheted off stone walls. Then came the storm. Gunfire erupted from every direction, rooftops, windows, narrow alleys that funneled death into the convoy. "Contact snipers left." "Top right," shouted a SEAL, his voice nearly drowned by the roar of automatic fire. The Marines pressed into the dirt, trapped in the choke of Kabul streets. Smoke and dust filled the air, comms bursting with frantic voices. Every rooftop seemed to lie with muzzle flashes. The sharp angles of the city turned against them. Hind exposed. Nowhere to go. But Doris didn't collapse into the chaos. She pressed her back against a shattered wall, her breathing even. Her eyes swept the battlefield, reading it the way a mapmaker reads terrain angles, blind spots, timing. There, a damaged wall half collapsed. Just enough handholds to climb. While others fired blindly, she moved. "Cover me," she ordered, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. No one questioned her. They just shifted fire, giving her the window she needed. Torres sprinted low, boots slamming against broken stone. Then she climbed, one hand, then the next, body moving with deliberate precision despite rounds snapping close enough to tear the air beside her. She reached the rooftop edge, rolled silently over, and came up behind the first sniper team. Her rifle barked once, clean, surgical, and the shooter crumpled before he even turned his head. She didn't linger. She flowed to the next position, her silhouette vanishing into shadow, then reappearing like smoke on the wind. Each squeeze of the trigger dropped another enemy, methodical, exact. Below, the Marines felt the pressure shift. Fire that had caged them seconds ago suddenly faltered. A SEAL glanced up, his eyes widening. He caught a glimpse of Torres, steady, focused, striking from above like the city itself had given her passage. "She's clearing them," he muttered almost in disbelief. One by one, the rooftops fell silent under her precision. Escape routes opened like doors being unlocked. "Move! Push left!" a Marine shouted, seizing the moment. The squad surged, dragging the wounded, rifles snapping to cover gaps that had seemed impossible to cross minutes earlier. From above, Torres laid down measured fire, each shot carving a path for her team. There was no panic in her movements, no wasted bullets. Every round meant freedom. Every round meant life. By the time the last rooftop fell quiet, the convoy was still intact. Every Marine was alive, bloodied, shaken, but alive. Torres climbed back down, boots landing in the dust, her rifle still warm. She said nothing as she rejoined the squad, slipping back into formation as if she hadn't just shifted the course of the fight single-handedly. The SEALs stared at her, the smirks they'd worn earlier replaced by stunned silence. One finally spoke under his breath. "That's not rumor. That's real." And in that moment, the legend of Specter 6 was no longer a whisper. It was undeniable truth. The convoy rolled back into base under the dim wash of floodlights. Dust still clinging to their uniforms. The smell of gunpowder clinging to their skin. Medics rushed forward, tending to the wounded. But